One night, one cruel comment, and her entire world collapsed in front of strangers who did nothing. She walked out certain she'd never recover, until a man she'd never met stepped forward and changed everything. A story of heartbreak, courage, and the moment a stranger becomes your lifeline. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching. Rain pressed softly against the windows of the Lantern Bistro, turning the city outside into a blur of trembling lights. Leela Harrington sat alone at table 7, her hands wrapped around an untouched glass of water. She had arrived early, of course she had. She always arrived early, as if trying to prove she was worth showing up for. Tonight was supposed to be hopeful, a blind date arranged by a colleague, a chance, maybe, to step into a chapter that didn't feel so painfully quiet. When Grant Wilcox finally walked in, he didn't bother hiding his disappointment. He scanned the room, spotted her, and hesitated long enough to wound her before even sitting down. "That's you?" he asked, as though wishing it weren't true. Leela tried to smile. "Hi, Grant, He slid into the seat with a sigh. "Wow, you look different than your pictures." She knew what that meant, the same message she'd heard in countless shapes and shades. Too soft, too round, too much. "I take them in good lighting," she managed to say, hoping humor might save the moment. It didn't. Grant's eyes skimmed her like a list of flaws. "Lighting doesn't change everything." The words landed like stones, loud enough for a couple at the next table to look over. Leela's pulse fluttered, tight in her throat. She tried steering the conversation elsewhere, asking him about his work, his daily fitness routine. He talked only about himself, the number of calories he burned, the people who admired him online. Whenever Leela spoke, he interrupted, or worse, ignored. Then came the final blow. Grant leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "I can't date someone who doesn't take care of herself. You know, I'm a brand. I need someone who reflects that." A breath left Leela's chest like she'd been pushed underwater. She tried to reply, but her voice cracked. Heat stung behind her eyes, not here, not in public. Grant stood abruptly, tossing his napkin onto the table. "This was a mistake. Good luck, though." He didn't lower his voice. He didn't look back. His footsteps echoed across the bistro as if marking every second of her humiliation. Leela covered her face with both hands. She wasn't sobbing, but she was close, the kind of trembling that comes before a storm. From the table nearby, a small voice whispered, "Daddy, why is that lady so sad?" Leela didn't look up, but someone approached, slow, steady steps. Then a calm, low voice said, "Excuse me, are you all right?" She lifted her head. A man stood beside her, broad-shouldered but gentle-eyed, wearing a gray t-shirt and a fire department jacket. Dark hair, a day's worth of stubble, and a presence that felt warm in a way she didn't know how to process. "I am fine," she lied. "Looks like someone was being a jerk," he replied, not unkindly. From behind him, a little girl with curly auburn hair peeked out. "Hi," she said softly, holding a crayon in her hand. "I can give you one if colors help." Despite everything, Leela felt the edges of a laugh. "Thank you," she whispered. The man pulled out the chair Grant had abandoned. "I'm Jonas," he said. "This is my daughter, Ruby. We were just finishing dinner. Thought you might not want to sit alone right now." Leela froze, embarrassed. "I don't want to interrupt." "You're not." Jonas's voice left no room for argument, only reassurance. He sat down, leaving a respectful distance between them. "What that guy did was cruel. No one deserves to be spoken to like that." Leela stared at her hands. "I shouldn't have come. I always ruin these things." "You didn't ruin anything," Jonas said. "He showed you who he was. That's not your burden to carry." Ruby placed the crayon on Leela's napkin like a small offering. "My dad says when people talk mean, it's because they're sad inside." Jonas chuckled. "She listens too closely sometimes." Leela swallowed hard. A tear escaped before she could stop it. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I don't cry like this. Tonight hurt more than I expected." "It's okay to hurt," Jonas said quietly. "You don't have to explain." For a few minutes they talked about simple things. Ruby's art project, the chocolate lava cake the bistro was known for, how Jonas worked unpredictable shifts at the fire station. Nothing deep, nothing heavy, just enough to steady her breathing again. When Leela finally stood to leave, Jonas rose too. "If you ever need company," he said, hesitant but sincere. "Not a date, just company I'm around." Ruby waved enthusiastically. "Bye, new friend." Leela stepped into the cool night air, heart aching yet strangely warm. She didn't expect to see them again. People like Jonas didn't orbit around people like her. But as she walked away from the glowing lanterns of the bistro, she couldn't shake one thought. The worst night of her year had been softened by the gentlest stranger she had ever met. 3 days passed, and Leela convinced herself that the moment in the bistro had been nothing more than a brief kindness from a stranger. People didn't linger. People didn't stay. Her mind replayed Grant's words far more often than Jonas's. At work, she sat across from a sixth grader struggling with anxiety, trying to channel a version of herself she wished she could be, calm, steady, unshaken. But even her voice felt thinner than usual. The girl noticed. "Miss Harrington, are you okay?" the child asked gently. Leela forced a smile. "Just a long week." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. That night she walked past the mirror in her apartment, catching a glimpse of her puffy eyes and fading makeup. She touched her cheek, remembering how Jonas had looked at her, not with pity, but with something frighteningly close to concern. It made her chest ache. On the other side of the city, Jonas sat at his kitchen counter, packing Ruby's lunch for school. She was drawing with markers on a sheet of paper. "Daddy," she said, "why didn't the sad lady come back to the restaurant?" Jonas closed the lunchbox. She probably didn't want to. But what if she's still sad? He paused. Ruby had a way of cutting right to the heart of things. "We don't know her," he reminded gently. Ruby shrugged. "We didn't know Mom at first either, but you loved her." Jonas inhaled slowly. The memories always came softly, but they always came. "She was different," he said. "So is the sad lady," Ruby replied. The next night, Thursday, Jonas made a decision he didn't fully understand. He took Ruby back to the Lantern Bistro. They ordered dinner. He kept glancing at the door, though he pretended not to. When their plates were nearly empty, the owner, Mr. Lawson, walked by. Jonas cleared his throat. "Hey, could you do me a favor?" he asked. Within minutes, Jonas had written a short note on a torn receipt. "If you ever want company, not a date, just company, I'm around. Jonas M." He left the note with the owner in case Leela returned someday. But he didn't expect her to. Leela didn't return to the bistro for nearly a week. Only when her coworkers insisted on grabbing takeout did she stop by after work. She walked in cautiously, hoping no one remembered her. "Miss," the owner called softly, "someone left this for you." Her heart stuttered when she saw the handwriting. She held the note all night, read it more times than she wanted to admit, debated texting him, wiped the message, retyped it, deleted it again. Finally, long past midnight, she sent, "Hi, it's Leela. Thank you for that night. If the offer for company still stands, I could use a little of it." She expected him to reply in the morning. Instead, the reply came 30 seconds later. "It stands any time." 2 days later, they met for coffee. Leela arrived 10 minutes early and almost left twice. When Jonas walked in, she felt her lungs tighten. She hadn't realized how tall he was, how his quiet presence filled a room without demanding anything from it. He smiled when he saw her. "You came." "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted. "I'm glad you did." They talked not like strangers, but like two people carrying invisible scars. Jonas didn't ask about Grant. He didn't pry. He asked simple things, the kind of things that showed he wanted to know her, not judge her. Ruby burst into the cafe half an hour later, racing toward Jonas with a picture she'd drawn. Leela laughed as Ruby held it up proudly. "Is that me?" "Yep, and you're smiling because Daddy says you needed to." Jonas groaned softly. "She hears everything." That afternoon, Ruby begged Leela to come to her weekend art club. Leela hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You're invited," Ruby insisted cheerfully. "Invited people can't intrude." Jonas raised a brow. "She's persistent. I'd say no, but it won't work." Leela agreed, with a flutter of nerves she didn't want to name. The art club was held in the community center gym. Kids sat in little clusters, dipping brushes into paints. Ruby ran to join them, pulling Leela with her. Leela, surprisingly, fit right in. She knelt beside a shy boy struggling to mix colors, guided a pair of giggling girls who splattered paint everywhere, and somehow ended up with streaks of blue on her own cheeks. Jonas watched from a distance, arms folded, a rare softness smoothing the lines of his face. You look like you're thinking hard, another parent teased him. Jonas smiled. I'm just seeing something good. After the session, Leela wiped her hands nervously. I hope I didn't overstep. You didn't, Jonas said. They loved you. Ruby hugged her leg. Are you gonna come again, please? Leela promised she would. And she meant it. Their connection grew steadily after that. Small meetups, long conversations, moments shared without pressure. But feelings, even gentle ones, have gravity, and gravity eventually makes things collide. It happened at a community picnic. Jonas was grilling hot dogs while Leela set out cups. A woman approached, sharp eyes, stiff posture. Jonas tensed when he saw her. Leela, he said quietly, this is Hannah, my late wife's sister. The woman's gaze slid over Leela, slow and assessing. So you're the counselor my niece keeps talking about. Leela swallowed. It's nice to meet you. Yes, Hannah replied flatly, though I didn't expect Jonas to move on so quickly, and not with, her eyes flicked over Leela's body, someone like you. The words hit harder than Grant's ever had. Jonas stepped forward instantly. Hannah, stop. But the damage was done. Leela's breath shook, her throat closed, old wounds ripped open with startling force. I should go, she whispered. Leela, wait, Jonas called, reaching for her. But she stepped back, eyes burning, voice trembling, and hurried away. Jonas watched her leave with a hollow ache. Ruby tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, why is Leela crying again? Jonas didn't have an answer. All he knew was that the fear he'd seen in Leela's eyes wasn't fear of him. It was fear of not being enough for someone again. And it broke something in him to realize she didn't know she already was. For 3 days, Leela didn't step outside after work. She moved through her apartment like a ghost drifting through familiar rooms. The encounter with Hannah kept replaying in her mind, each word sharper than the last. Someone like you. She told herself she had imagined the way Jonas's face tightened when she ran. She told herself he wasn't disappointed, that she hadn't ruined anything. But shame is louder than truth, and it drowned everything else out. She muted her phone, buried herself in work, told coworkers she was tired, lied to herself that she didn't miss Jonas and Ruby. But every night when she lay down, she remembered Ruby's tiny arms around her legs, Jonas's steady voice saying, you didn't ruin anything, his eyes that carried both strength and hurt. She missed them more than she wanted to admit. On the 4th morning, she arrived late to school, her eyes swollen from crying. She sat at her desk, sorting through files when the principal knocked gently. Leela, there's a student asking for you. It was Mia, a 7th grader with freckles and trembling hands. She had been bullied that morning, called names, shoved near her locker. Her voice cracked as she said, they called me weird and ugly, and too much. Too much. The words cut through Leela like lightning. She knelt in front of the girl, placing a soft hand on her shoulder. Mia, if someone can't see your worth, it's their limitation, not yours, and I know it hurts. I know how heavy their words can feel, but you are not what they say. Then why does it feel like I am? Leela's throat ached. Because you're human, and being human means believing lies sometimes, but it doesn't make them true. She held Mia until the girl's shaking eased. And in comforting her, something shifted inside Leela, a truth she had been hiding from herself. She wasn't angry at Jonas. She wasn't angry at Hannah. She was angry at the old wounds inside her that never fully healed. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Jonas sat alone at the fire station on a slow shift, staring at the text thread on his phone, threadbare conversations, half-finished sentences, and now total silence. He reread Leela's last message before the picnic. Looking forward to it, I'm nervous but excited. He never expected her to vanish like she had, and he hated himself for not stopping Hannah sooner. Still brooding, his coworker Marco asked, dropping into the chair beside him. I'm not brooding, Jonas muttered. You've been staring at the same screen for 20 minutes. That's brooding. Jonas sighed. I'm worried about someone. Marco raised a brow. The counselor, the one your kid adores. Yeah, she walked away hurting, and I haven't seen her since. Marco studied him. Look, moving forward after losing someone, it's messy. No perfect timing. But if she's good for you and good for Ruby, don't let fear make you passive. Jonas rubbed a hand over his face. I'm trying not to rush things. I don't want to break anything more than it already is. Marco pointed at Jonas's phone. Maybe she's not afraid of you. Maybe she's afraid you don't actually want her. The words hit Jonas hard because he knew. He knew Leela had spent her whole life being treated like a second choice. He wasn't about to let her believe that again. That evening, Ruby burst into the kitchen after school, dropping her backpack with a thud. "Daddy, did Leela text back today?" Jonas shook his head. Ruby frowned, biting her lip. "Did I do something wrong? Did she stop coming because I talked too much?" "No," Jonas said immediately, kneeling to her level. "You didn't do anything wrong. Leela cares about you. She's just dealing with feelings that are hard to talk about." Ruby processed this with more seriousness than most adults could manage. Then she asked quietly, "Does she know we miss her?" Jonas paused. "No," he admitted softly. "I don't think she does." Ruby's brows knitted together. "Then tell her, people can't know you miss them if you don't say." Jonas gave a tiny laugh. "You're smarter than I am." "I know," she replied with a grin. That night, once Ruby was asleep, Jonas finally wrote a message. Not long, not poetic, not forceful. Just honest. "Leela, I don't want to crowd you. I know something hurt you deeply the other day. I want you to know you didn't do anything wrong. And you're not alone, not in this, not in anything. I care how you feel. Ruby cares too. If you're not ready to talk, that's fine. I'll wait. Just don't disappear thinking you don't matter." He almost deleted it. Then he hit send. Leela found the message the next morning. She read it once. Then again. Then she pressed her phone against her chest and closed her eyes, letting the tightness break. For the first time in a week, she replied, "I'm sorry I ran. It wasn't you, it was me. I got scared. I don't want to be a burden in your life or Ruby's." His response came 2 minutes later. "You're not a burden, you're someone we care about. Come talk to me when you're ready." Her hands trembled as she typed, "I can talk today." They met at the Riverside Park, under a line of willow trees swaying in a gentle breeze. Leela arrived first, heart pounding in her ears. Jonas approached slowly, giving her space, giving her choice. She forced out the words before she lost courage. "Jonas, I pulled away because I didn't believe I deserved you, or Ruby, or any of this." Jonas stopped in front of her, close enough to feel present, far enough to feel safe. "You deserve more than what life has given you," he said softly. "You deserve people who don't walk away." "But I did walk away. And I'm still here." Leela's eyes filled. "Hannah made me feel small. I know she's grieving. I know she doesn't know me. But hearing those words, it was like hearing every insult I've ever carried all over again." Jonas exhaled. "I should have protected you from that." "No," Leela whispered. "You shouldn't have to protect me from everything. I need to learn how to protect myself too." Jonas stepped closer, gently lifting her chin so she couldn't look away. "Then let me walk with you while you learn." She broke then, not with shame, but with release. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her with the steadiness she'd been craving her whole life. They stood there for a long moment, letting the wind move around them like a quiet promise. When they finally stepped apart, there was no confusion between them, no pretending, no distance. Just two people choosing each other slowly, with bruised hearts that still wanted to try. "Jonas," Leela said softly, "what are we now?" He smiled gently, "Two people who aren't running anymore." And for the first time in a long time, Leela believed she wasn't running. From him, from her fears, or from the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was worth loving. The Lantern Bistro glowed like a pocket of warm light against the cool evening air. Lanterns hung from the ceiling like soft stars, casting golden reflections across the tables. Leela stood outside the door, her hands trembling slightly against her coat. She could hear faint laughter, the clinking of glasses, the low hum of a place alive with people who didn't know that this night felt like a test she wasn't sure she'd pass. She almost turned around. Almost. Then Jonas stepped out from the entrance, as if he sensed her hesitation. He didn't touch her at first, he simply looked at her with that steady warmth she was still learning to believe. "You came," he said gently. "I did," she whispered, "even though my stomach is very sure this was a terrible decision." Jonas smiled. "Then your stomach can sit with me too, I'll calm it down." She laughed, the sound thin but real, and Jonas tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Ready?" "No," she said honestly, "but let's go." Inside, the bistro buzzed with the annual charity dinner crowd. Servers moved gracefully between tables. Fairy lights curled around pillars. A violinist played near the back, soft and nostalgic. Leela felt the first pang of memory pressing down. The echo of the night Grant shattered her confidence right here, at this very table. Jonas noticed her faraway look. "We don't have to sit in the same place," he offered. Leela shook her head. "No, I want to sit exactly where I broke. Maybe then I'll stop feeling like the broken one." Jonas squeezed her hand and guided her to table 7. When they sat, Leela exhaled shakily. "Wow, this feels heavier than I thought." "Because this place remembers," Jonas said softly. "But so do you, and tonight we're rewriting something." Before she could answer, a familiar, excited voice called out, "Leela." Ruby came rushing in from across the room, holding a tiny paper flower she had made at the kids' craft corner. She hugged Leela fiercely, as if making sure she stayed this time. "You came back. I told my friend Ava you would." Leela laughed, hugging her back. "I promised I wasn't going anywhere." Ruby climbed onto the chair beside Jonas, leaning forward with bright eyes. "Daddy said tonight is important. I don't know why, but I wore my sparkly shoes just in case something magical happens." Jonas rubbed his forehead. "I didn't tell her that exactly." "Maybe not in words," Ruby said with a grin. Leela smiled softly, her heart swelling with a warmth that felt brand new and terrifyingly precious. Dinner flowed with ease, slow conversation, gentle teasing, moments where Leela caught Jonas watching her like he couldn't believe she was real. She felt lighter than she had in years. But the night had its tests. Halfway through dinner, someone approached the table. Leela froze before even fully seeing the face. Grant. He stood there in an expensive jacket, surrounded by 2 friends who looked like clones of his arrogance. "Well," he said with a smirk, "look who decided to upgrade." Jonas didn't move. He didn't scowl. He simply turned his head with the calm of someone who knew exactly who he was. But Leela placed her hand gently on Jonas's arm. "I've got this," she whispered. She stood, her knees shook, but her voice didn't. "Grant," she said evenly, "I'm glad you're here." He blinked, surprised. "You are?" "Yes," Leela continued, "because it means I get to say something I didn't say that night." People nearby subtly tuned in. Leela stepped closer, but not in anger, in clarity. "You don't get to define me. Not then, not now, not ever. What you said wasn't truth. It was cruelty, and I carried it for too long, but I'm done with that." Grant scoffed, trying to recover. "Relax, it was just honesty." "No," Leela replied. "This is honesty. I feel sorry for you, because tearing people down must be the only way you feel taller." Grant's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Leela lifted her chin. "Now leave my table." Grant took a step back, color rising to his cheeks. His friends shuffled awkwardly, and the 3 of them disappeared into the crowd. When Leela sat down again, Jonas stared at her like he was witnessing a sunrise. "That," he said quietly, "was strength." Leela swallowed a wave of emotion. "I've been afraid my whole life, afraid of not being enough, afraid of being too much, afraid of being replaceable, but tonight I'm tired of being afraid." Jonas reached across the table, taking her hand in both of his. "You're not replaceable, you're remarkable." Her eyes filled. "Jonas," she whispered, "why me? Why choose someone with this many scars?" He leaned in, his voice low and sincere. "Because scars mean you survived, and because you're the first person I've wanted to build something with since losing Anna. Not because you remind me of her, because you don't. You're someone new, someone good, someone who makes my daughter smile like the world is magic." Ruby, overhearing just the last part, grinned. "She makes me smile because she smells like vanilla cookies." Leela laughed through tears. Jonas did too. The violinist began to play a slow, aching melody. The lights dimmed. Couples drifted onto the dance floor. Jonas stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." Leela hesitated. "I'm not very good." "I don't want good," he said softly. "I want you." She placed her hand in his, letting him guide her into the soft glow of lantern light. His arms circled her waist. Hers rested on his shoulders. They swayed gently, and for the first time, Leela let her head rest against his chest. She heard his heartbeat, steady, grounding, safe. "Jonas," she whispered, "are we something now?" He lowered his forehead to hers. We are whatever you're ready for. And if I say I'm ready for you, she breathed. Then I'm yours, he said simply. Their first kiss was not dramatic or blazing, it was soft, careful, like placing a fragile hope between them and trusting neither would drop it. Ruby clapped loudly from the table. I knew something magical would happen. Everyone laughed. Months passed. Leela became part of their lives not suddenly, but slowly, like light filling a room after dawn. She helped Ruby with school projects, cooked dinners with Jonas, left sticky notes in the fire station kitchen reminding him to eat during long shifts. Jonas loved her not because she completed him, but because she blended into the spaces he thought would always stay empty. One crisp morning, Jonas brought her to the community center for Ruby's art showcase. Leela expected handprints, glitter, maybe a paper sun, but Ruby tugged them both toward a mural on the back wall. It was a painting of three figures holding hands, a man, a woman, and a child, standing under lanterns like the ones at the bistro. Above it, Ruby had painted one sentence. Everyone belongs somewhere. Leela touched her mouth, tears spilling over. Ruby, she whispered, this is beautiful. Ruby hugged her from the side. It's us. Jonas took Leela's hand, pulling her gently into the center of the room. Her heart fluttered as he dropped to one knee. Time stilled. Leela Harrington, he said softly, you walked into our lives when we didn't know we needed you. You healed pieces of me I never thought would mend. And you made my daughter feel whole again. If you'll have us, we'd love to make you part of our family. Leela's breath caught. Jonas, yes, yes, of course. Ruby jumped up and down, squealing. We're a family now. Leela wrapped her arms around both of them, and for the first time in her life, the world didn't feel like something she had to survive. It felt like something she finally belonged to. And every Thursday night, without fail, they returned to the Lantern Bistro. Not because of the past, but because that was the place where light first found them. The place where pain cracked open just enough to let love in. The place where Leela learned that sometimes the worst night of your life becomes the doorway to everything beautiful that comes after.